YFF4 app now.
The state stands with the people of Ukraine and as they bravely fight to defend their country, and they are doing that. And as Putin continues his merciless assault, the United States and our allies and partners continue to work in lockstep to ramp up the economic pressures on Putin and to further isolate Russia on the global stage. Later today, together with other NATO allies in the G7, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, as well as the European Union, we're going to jointly announce several new steps to squeeze Putin and hold him even more accountable for his aggression against Ukraine. And I want to speak to a few of those points today. First, each of our nations is going to take steps to deny most favored nation status to Russia. A most favored nation status designation means two countries have agreed to trade with each other under the best possible terms. Low tariffs, few barriers of trade, and the highest possible imports allowed. In the United States, we call this permanent normal trade relations, PNTR, but it's the same thing. Revoking PNTR for Russia is going to make it harder for Russia to do business with the United States, and doing it in unison with other nations that make up half of the global economy will be another crushing blow to the Russian economy. It's already suffering very badly from our sanctions. And I want to thank Speaker Pelosi, Leader McCarthy, Leaders Schumer and McConnell, and Senators Wyden and Crapo, Representatives Neal and Brady for their bipartisan leadership on this in the Congress. I would like to offer a special thanks to Speaker Pelosi, who's been a strong advocate for revoking PNTR and who agreed to hold off on that in the House until I could line up all of our key allies to keep us in complete unison. Unity among our allies is critically important, as you all know, from my perspective at least. Many issues divide us in Washington, but standing for democracy in Ukraine, pushing Russia's aggression, should not be one of those issues. The free world is coming together to confront Putin. Our two parties here at home are leading the way. And with that bipartisan cooperation, I'm looking forward to signing into law the bill revoking PNTR, which is, again, most people think of it as most favored nation status. We're also taking a further step of banning imports of goods from several signature sectors of the Russian economy, including seafoods, vodka, and diamonds. And we're going to continue to squeeze Putin. The G7 will seek to deny Russia the ability to borrow from leading multinational institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Putin is an aggressor. He is the aggressor, and Putin must pay the price. He cannot pursue a war that threatens the very foundations, which he's doing, the very foundations of international peace and stability, and then ask for financial help from the international community. The G7 is also stepping up pressure on corrupt Russian billionaires. We're adding new names to the list of oligarchs and their families that we're targeting. And we're increasing coordination among the G7 countries to target and capture their ill-begotten gains. They support Putin. They steal from the Russian people, and they seek to hide their money in our countries. They're part of that kleptocracy that exists in Moscow, and they must share in the pain of these sanctions. And while we're going after these their super yachts and their vacation homes and worth hundreds of millions of dollars, we're also going to make it harder for them to buy high-end products manufactured in our country. We're banning the export of luxury goods to Russia. They're also the latest steps we're taking, but they're not the last steps we're going to take. And as I said, at the beginning of all these steps, we're going to hit Putin harder because the United States and our closest allies and partners are acting in unison. And the totality of our sanctions and export controls is crushing the Russian economy. The ruble has lost more than half its value. They tell me it takes about 200 rubles to equal $1 these days. Moscow Stock Exchange has been closed for 2 weeks because they know the moment it opens, it will probably collapse. Credit rating agencies has downgraded Russia's government to junk status, its economy to junk status. The list of businesses, international corporations leaving Russia is growing by the day. We're also continuing to close corporations with allies and partners to make sure that the close cooperation we continue to have, the Ukrainian people are able to defend their own nation. The United States has sent more than $1 billion in security assistance to Ukraine over the last year, including anti-armor and anti-air capabilities, taking out tanks and planes and helicopters, with new shipments arriving every day. We, the United States, are also facilitating significant shipments of security assistance from our allies and partners to Ukraine. And the humanitarian front, we're working closely with the UN and humanitarian organizations to support the people of Ukraine who have been displaced by the violence in Ukraine. We're providing tens of thousands of tons of human supplies, humanitarian supplies, food, water, medicines, coming via truck and train every single day. Yesterday in Poland, Vice President Harris announced an additional $53 million in additional humanitarian support to Ukraine. That brings the total humanitarian assistance to $107 million in just 2 weeks. We've joined this effort with more than 30 other countries who are providing hundreds of millions more. And last night, to their great credit, the Congress passed a bipartisan spending bill that included an additional $13.6 billion in new assistance to the Ukrainian people. And I look forward to signing that immediately. And I also want to be clear, though. We will make sure Ukraine has weapons to defend against an invading Russian force. We will send money and food and aid to save the Ukrainian people. And I will welcome Ukrainian refugees. We should welcome them here with open arms if they need access. And we're going to provide more support for Ukraine. We're going to continue to stand together with our allies in Europe and send unmistakable message. We'll defend every single inch of NATO territory with the full might of the united and galvanized NATO. We will not fight a war against Russia in Ukraine. Direct confrontation between NATO and Russia is World War III, something we must strive to prevent. But we already know Putin's war against Ukraine will never be a victory. He hoped to dominate Ukraine without a fight. He failed. He hoped to fracture European resolve. He failed. He hoped to weaken the transatlantic alliance. He failed. He hoped to split apart American democracies in terms of our positions. He failed. The American people are united. The world is united. And we stand with the people of Ukraine. We will not let autocrats and would-be emperors dictate the direction of the world. Democracies are rising to meet this moment, rallying the world to the side of peace and the side of security. We're showing our strength, and we will not falter. God bless all of you. God bless Ukraine, and God bless our troops.
The White House has said that Russia may use chemical weapons or create a false flag operation to use them. What evidence have you seen showing that? And would the U.S. have a military response if Putin does launch a chemical weapons attack?
I'm not going to speak about the intelligence, but Russia would pay a severe price if they use chemical weapons.
Extending the federal gas tax?
President Biden addressing reporters and the nation from the Roosevelt Room of the White House, announcing that the G7 nations, as well as the United States, will take steps to remove favored trading status from the nation of Russia. That is already in the works. It requires congressional approval, but the president thanked the bipartisan leaders of Congress for ushering that through. He mentioned that the House Speaker had held off on a bill to do that while he could get the allies around the world organized so that they could work together. And the president said the free world is coming together. He also said again that Vladimir Putin is the aggressor and must pay a price. He expanded steps to list additional oligarchs who will now be sanctioned by the United States and its allies. And he said very bluntly that direct confrontation between NATO and Russia is, quote, World War III, according to President Biden, and that must be avoided at all costs. I want to turn to Stephanie Ruhle. She's our chief business correspondent. Russia is not a top trading partner of the U.S., but it seems clear that the United States, in conjunction with its allies, is hoping that this will pack a punch.
That's exactly right. Slowly over the last 3 weeks, or gradually, one could say, you are seeing the United States and our West allies really tighten this vice around Putin to do whatever we can to bring him to the table. What stands out the most to me, Savannah, is that just over the last couple of weeks, you have seen all of the progress that was made over the last few decades to open things up between Russia and the West, right, post-USSR, you are seeing all of that disappear right before our eyes and take us to a place that we have not been in decades.
All right, Stephanie, thank you. I want to, while we have this moment, turn to NBC's Richard Engel. He is live in Kiev, and you heard that statement from the president in response to a question that Putin should not use chemical weapons in Ukraine or will face the severest of consequences.
The reason that the United States and Ukrainian officials are so worried about chemical weapons is it has become part of Russian propaganda. For the last several days, Russia has been saying that the United States is helping the Ukrainians to develop biological weapons laboratories, chemical weapons. Putin had already said that Ukraine was developing nuclear weapons. Ukrainians have denied this. The Pentagon has denied this. But with all of this focus coming from the Pentagon, coming from the Kremlin, there is a concern that Vladimir Putin is trying to ready the public for some sort of chemical weapons use potentially by Russia and then blaming it on Ukraine. And we've seen propaganda being used from the very start of this conflict. Don't forget, it was Vladimir Putin who launched this invasion. He said in self-defense because this country is supposedly a threat to Russia because it is run by a Nazi cabal, which of course it is not.
Richard, in the minute or so we have seen an absolutely savage attack on Mariupol in the southeast of the country, and we're starting to see a closing in around the capital city where you stand, Kiev. Can you give us an update on what Russian forces are doing and what kind of resistance they're encountering?
So the Russian military offensive started out slow. It is now gaining momentum, and it is taking two basic shapes. One is siege, the other is attack. In Mariupol, we're seeing classic siege warfare, warfare that dates back decades, if not centuries, with Russian forces surrounding Mariupol, keeping the 400,000 people inside. The Red Cross says there's no medicine left in the city, that people have begun to fight over food. And then the other tactic, attacking cities, attacking population centers. And this city, Kiev, the capital, is clearly in Russia's sights, and a massive military convoy that has been stalled on the outskirts of this city is now once again on the move.
Yeah, and 2.5 million refugees and counting fleeing Ukraine. Richard, thank you as always. So once again, the president addressing the nation to announce that the U.S. will revoke favored trade nation status for Russia, will ban imports such as seafood, vodka, and diamonds, and expand the list of Russian oligarchs who will be feeling the pinch of sanctions in the coming days. We'll have more for you on MSNBC, NBC News Now, and later on Nightly News. Most of you will return now to the Today Show. I'm Savannah Guthrie in New York. This has been an NBC News special report.